Hey everybody, this is Jim the Tabletop Engineer and welcome to a new Paint a Mini video. Right now I'm going to start painting a mini called Arielle. This is another investigator from the Cthulhu Death May Die game from CMON. I call it CMON. But I want to go ahead and paint this one up because I've decided I want to play the game with 3 investigators, not 2. You can play it solo with I think up to 4 or 5, but I think 3 is going to probably be the most I'm willing to manage at once. So what am I going to be chatting with you about during this video? Well, this is an easy one. I had somebody email me. It was actually a fellow game content creator, zine writer, and they asked me if I was going to do this Dungeon 23 thing. Okay, so if you haven't heard of this, Dungeon 23 is this. It's sort of like a challenge. Remember the I forget what it was, the ice bucket challenge. This is not that crazy. It's mainly for gamers, especially fantasy RPG gamers. But it was created by the creator of the Mothership RPG, and basically this is what it is. During the year of 2023, the challenge is to create a mega dungeon that is, you create a room basically every day. So you'd have this mega dungeon of 365 rooms. You could split it over different levels. You could split it over multiple dungeons that somehow link to each other. Maybe there's a portal or whatever. But there's a lot of people that are stepping up and saying, I'm going to do this. More power to you. Short answer for me, not going to happen. Let me point the camera down. I'm going to get painting on this, and I'll explain my position on the Dungeon 23. All right, so Dungeon 23 is basically the idea is that you'll create this massive mega dungeon over a period of time. Now here's the deal. When I was in 6th grade, this is back in like 1980 or 1981, I actually created a mega dungeon. Back then, mega dungeons were we didn't call them mega dungeons, but there were these things that were these dungeon sprawls. Let's call them that. So they were dungeon sprawls, and they basically consisted of just huge underground dungeons. Your party would go in, root around, kill some monsters, defeat some traps, and then when they'd had enough, or when it was looking like they were getting ready to get their death handed to them on a platter, you bailed and you went up and you healed and you just got ready to go back and do another round. So, and I call them mega dungeons because that's really what they were. Even Gary Gygax apparently was running one at the end, or up to the end, I think, where he had this dungeon that players would go in and they would root around, find secret passageways and things like that. But when they had enough, when it was getting pretty dicey, they would all head back to the surface. And so the idea of the mega dungeon, it's not new. I mean, they've been around. There are some examples of mega dungeons out there. One of the biggest ones that I know, or one of the most popular ones I know, is called Temple of Elemental Evil. It's not one dungeon. It's multiple levels, and then there's like break-offs and side quests and things like that. But all in all, it's a massive, massive adventure. And so, anyway, so people are talking about, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this. Well, I didn't even consider it, not even for a minute. The minute I started seeing videos about it, I started watching them. I thought it was kind of humorous, and I welcome people to do it. I think it's a great thing, especially for people who've never created an adventure, for written an adventure or whatever. It's probably going to be a great experience for them, a learning experience, especially if they see it all the way to the end. And that is going to be my first point of contention about the mega dungeon. Look, every year people make, New Year's resolutions, and I was watching something on the news earlier that said like 10% of people who make New Year's resolutions actually can say they stuck with it the whole year. So, just keep that in mind, all right? One of the things I think is going to happen is we're going to see a lot of videos of people, creating their mega dungeon. I don't know whether they'll video it, of they're making the maps, or how they'll do it, but I think it's going to start out very strong, and there'll be a lot of it, and then it's going to peter off towards the, maybe February or March. And I'll tell you why. Because, and I speak from experience here, creating content on a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, it's tiring. It's a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of the people that think, oh, I'll make a one-room dungeon every day, I think that, they have good intention, and some of them will do it. But here's the thing. Creating a dungeon is one thing. Creating a good dungeon adventure, that's another. And I speak from experience because I mentioned when I was in 6th grade, I kid you not, I created a mini dungeon. I did. It was called, you're going to laugh. And I find it humorous because, remember, I was a 6th grader. I believe it was called the Dungeon of Death and Doom. It was either Dungeon of Death and Doom or Dungeon of Doom and Death. I think it was Death and Doom. Even back then, I had a sense of, not alliteration, but I knew that Death and Doom sounded better than Doom and Death. So I'm pretty confident I called it the Dungeon of Doom and Death. Death and Doom. And here's how I made it. I grabbed a sheet of poster board. I remember this, and I wish I still had it. I am for certain that my mom pitched it at some point, probably because it looked like junk. But I grabbed a sheet of poster board, and I cut it to size. It was like 2 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper with just maybe a 1/4-inch gap border all around. I folded it in half, and that was the cover. And then the inside, I left room to tape, not glue. This was very low budget. I was going to tape in the map that I was creating for this adventure. And my dad, by the way, was a chemist. He was a chemistry PhD, and he would bring home a lot of cool things that for a kid back then, it was just really cool stuff. But he brought home, occasionally, more than occasionally, quite often, he would bring home for his work reams of paper of different types. Some of it was like this real advanced scientific graph paper that the squares were teeny tiny, and they were what's the word I'm looking for? They decreased in size, like size of the square as it moved right to left. And so I think it was for graphing things that would have been like exponential, if that makes sense, like exponential growth, not linear, which linear growth would be mapped on a regular graph paper. But this would be used for something I think that was changing exponentially because of the way the squares changed. Anyway, long story short, one of the graph papers that my dad brought home, and I remember it was so awesome. It was like standard graph paper. All the squares were the same size, but it was really, really micro. Like the squares were tiny, tiny, maybe smaller than 1/8 of an inch square. And when I saw it, I was like, dude, I could make a huge dungeon on that. And so that's what I did. I took 2 sheets of it, and I started creating this dungeon adventure that I had in my mind. I knew what I was going to do. And I did. I created it, and it was what you would expect from an inexperienced dungeon master of age 10, 11, 12. I think I was 12. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was basically room after room of nothing but either a monster or a trap or both, and that was it. That was how my dungeon, progressed. It was very, very, I don't remember much about it other than it was bad. It was bad. But it was my first attempt at a mega dungeon, which, again, we didn't have that term. It was just a giant dungeon. And honestly, I never finished it. It was huge. I think I probably did I know I did enough to tape the first page in, because I did tape in the left one, and it was, and rooms on it were numbered, and a big room, like a gigantic room that you would have, like, say 50 feet by 100 feet, it would be only like maybe a quarter or a half inch square on the paper. And I had this thing filled with corridors and doorways and all kinds of, there was water running through it, all kinds of really cool stuff. But keep in mind the scale. It was so huge. And each room was numbered, and I did have note pages where I said room 1 is, there's this monster and this or this trap. Room 2, this monster, this trap. It was very, very simplistic. So, I tell you this because it is exactly what I think a lot of people are going to end up with when they start trying their hand at writing, a mega dungeon. Now, there are a lot of experienced adventure writers out there who have written blogs or zines or what have you, and they've been DMing for a long time, and they kind of know how to do it, right? I mean, and they'll probably produce some really cool stuff. And I think we'll see some of this kickstarted in a zine format when people get really near the finishing line. I think we may see people saying, "Hey, Dungeon 23, my Dungeon 23 experience is almost done. I'm going to kickstart the full adventure." And some of them will be amazing. Some of them will be absolutely amazing. There'll be something that you could run for years with your group and never, ever run out of adventure. Then there's going to be some that probably just, people want to just do for just as a sign-off to say it's completed. I'll kickstart it. I might get 100 backers on it, but I'm going to do it so that it's a done deal. It's signed, sealed, delivered, and that's cool too. But I do think that the majority of Dungeon 23 mega dungeons are going to peter out because it is a lot of time, it's a lot of energy to create something new every day that is good, right? I mean, some days you're going to be on, some days you're going to be off, and the secret, and I'll tell you, because as I've written 35 technology books, I've written I don't know how many gaming books or gaming zines. Let me tell you, there are days that you will put content onto paper or screen or whatever, and it's not good, but you'll make a note that you got to come back and clean it up, or something's got to be redone or tightened up a little bit. But you just keep going because that's what you learn when you write for a living, is that sometimes, the day doesn't wait for you. You just got to get something on paper just so you don't lose momentum, right? You get something written down today so that you don't lose the momentum and you'll be there to write tomorrow. And it's, at least for me and many writers I know, that is how you do it. You get something down. So people, who are doing this need to remember that. There'll be days where you're like, I don't want to do it today. I'll do 2 rooms tomorrow. Well, let me promise you this. You do that, and next thing is going to do is you're going to go, well, I'll just write 5 pages on Monday, and that'll cover my whole week, and then I won't have to do it the rest of the day. You'll find lots of reasons to avoid the 1 per day monotony, and it's monotonous. I produce a lot of content on a regular basis, and it can be tiring. Now, in my case, sometimes I get paid for it, and when you get paid for it, when it's your job, you get up and you put words on paper and you do what you have to do. But I tell you this only because if you are considering doing this, go for it. I say absolutely go for it. But I just want to put it out there that there are, it sounds good on paper to say I'm going to write a page, a new room every day for the next 365 days, and at the end of the year, I will have this dungeon of 365 rooms, give or take, and it's going to be awesome, and everybody's going to want to play it. Well, okay, you may be right. It may be one of those that just everybody you may have such an awesome idea that everybody's like, holy cow, I gotta play this. I've never heard of this before. Why is that the same color? I must have done something different. Sorry, I used the wrong color on the boot. Now I'm regretting it. So I didn't pay attention, but that's okay. I can fix that. So yeah, you just gotta make sure that you are consistent, because once you develop a habit of like skipping a day, oh, I'll do 2 tomorrow, and you may do 2 tomorrow, but next time you're going to miss 3 days or 4 days, and you're going to say, you know what, I really don't want to write today. I don't feel I don't have it in me, so I'm going to skip today and I'll do something different tomorrow. Okay. It's going to get easier every time you do that to put it off for another day, another week, and pretty soon you're going to reach a point where you're just going to say, you know what, it was fun, but I'm done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anything you're going to do for 365 days, if you don't make it to the end, there is nothing to be ashamed of, because trust me, that's a long time to be doing something like creating a dungeon. But again, people want to try it. I say go for it, because it is going to be a good experience for a lot of people who've never created a dungeon or an adventure of some sort. And this will be an eye-opener for them. They'll understand a little bit about what's involved. And I do think this is going to it's going to end up with some new dungeon creators out there who they may not do the full 365 days, but they'll get the experience and they'll know how to create shorter, tighter adventures. And that's the trick, is the short and tight adventures, getting those done. So anyway, to answer why am I not going to do it? Well, I'm busy. I have a lot of other writing gigs going on. I don't want to get stuck doing that. Plus, I don't have any interest in creating something that large. 365 days of the same dungeon or the same, creating the same content every day. That's going to get old. I just can't. I can't commit to that. And I know that there are people out there who are probably going to enjoy it. And I hope that they'll share it on YouTube or on a blog or whatever, share their experience. And for those who really, really are getting close to the end, it's going to be interesting, like I say, to see what comes out of this in terms of quality of the quality of some of the new adventures and things like that. I don't know anybody in my circle right now of what I call OSR writers who is doing it. Now that may change in the next day or two, because I haven't heard from all of them. I pay attention to a lot of writers, and not everybody's chimed in. The ones that I expected to do it, I haven't heard yet. So that's probably because they're getting ready for it or they're prepping for it or something. But I have heard from some who said, no, I've got my own zine I'm doing. I don't have time for it, and I get that, because that's kind of where I am. I don't have the bandwidth to do it right now. So there was another point I wanted to make about this. Okay, so mega dungeons. Mega dungeons sound good on paper, but the other thing you have to ask yourself, or at least ask your group of players, is, are you gonna stick with me, or do you really want to work through this mega dungeon that's going to take 2 years of weekly playing, maybe longer? Do you really want to go through this as a team? Do we want to do this? And I don't know many players who would not lose interest in something like that after a small period of time. I typically run adventures that go anywhere from 6 sessions up to maybe 20 or 30. That's probably the most before we go on to something different, a new adventure, or maybe even a new game or something, new characters, all that. But if you've got a gaming group that really meets regularly, and this is something you think they would buy into, then more power to you. I think that's awesome, because I don't know anybody in my own little gaming group that would commit to playing a game of that length. Now, creating it, sure, that's one thing, but actually playing it is another. And that's a real question, is if you have the players that are willing to do that. I think it's an interesting project. I think that it's going to. I think that we will hear, of some people who are at the 6-month mark. Somehow, some way, they will let us know that they are still going strong with it. But for me, I cannot. I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing it for that long of a period of time. So, Dungeon 23. Again, it's this project to create a year-long. It's a year-long project to create a new room every day. Now, there are going to be some who are doing like 3 rooms a day or 5 rooms a day. They're just very energetic about it. I don't know if they'll be able to keep up that pace. Maybe they will. I mean, there's lots of writers out there that produce a lot of content in a very short period of time. I'm just going by my experience as a writer that it can be very difficult to create that much content regularly. And when I say regularly, I mean like every day. Okay, you have got to commit to that every day if you want to actually do the project. Because at the end of the project, if you intend to promote it as Dungeon 365 or Dungeon 23, you're going to have to show something for it, right? You're going to have to show a mega dungeon that consists of 365 rooms, or at least something that shows that there has been a year's worth of energy put into it. I don't know. I tell you that I did not even give 2 seconds thought to it. And I've had a few people ask me offline, hey man, have you heard about? And that's how I heard about it. Somebody emailed me and said, hey, have you heard of this thing called Dungeon 23? And I was like, no. And they said, go on YouTube. And I did, and sure enough, that answered my question. There's lots of videos from people who are prepping for it, and so I was asked if I'm going to do it, and the answer is not a chance. But if you are, again, I would love to hear from it in the comments below. I think it's a worthy endeavor. If anything, it will give you a chance to see what's involved in creating something that has, a story to it. If that's not the right word, a reality to it. And I use that word. Let me explain. When you're creating a dungeon, why is the dungeon there? Why is this room there? Who dug out that room? Who tiled it or did the masonry? Why did they do it? What did this room used to be? It's now a dungeon, right? It's now sort of decrepit and old, but what did it used to be? All these questions, to be realistic, I mean, your players may never ask, what is this? How did all these rooms come together? How did the monsters get in here? The funniest, I read something a long time ago. It was funny. It was like, you make it all the way to the end of the dungeon to fight the big boss. It's a dragon. The dragon's in a room with a single door entrance. Unless it's spent its whole life there, which I guess is a possibility. How did it get there? How did the dragon get in the room? You have to, for me, when you're creating a dungeon, there needs to be a story to it. There needs to be a logic to it. And with these mega dungeons where you just go in, fight some monsters, get some loot, go up, spend it on treasure, magic items, go back down, do it again. That's fun. I mean, I've played games like that were very fun. But man, I don't know about a 365 room dungeon and coming up with the explanation for why it is. How did this thing come into being? That's going to be a really difficult thing. You can ignore it. You could not even go and answer that question. You could it's just there. This mega dungeon exists. It's a huge dungeon for adventurers to come and run through. But I don't know. For me as a DM, I need to understand, why is this building here? Why are these structures the way they are? There has to be. We're playing a fantasy game, all right? People are casting spells and we're fighting monsters, and it's fantasy. But even with a fantasy, you want to have some sort of realistic expectation of why your hero is going down there. Now, granted, if there's a story about, some long-lost treasure, that's great, but who wants to slog through 365 rooms looking for one long-lost treasure? There needs to be a larger story there, and quite honestly, I like to think I can write, but I don't know if I could come up with a story that could encompass a 365 room dungeon. I'm just telling you like it is. That's a lot of content for very little reward, in my opinion. All right, I didn't want to make this video too long. We're at 25 minutes here. I got the miniature painted, and this is my third one. This is what's her name? Arielle. She is a big game hunter, specialist hunter, and it's gonna be fun to play her and my other two with this game. So just know I'm getting ready to get the Cthulhu Death May Die game set up as soon as I get this one dry and protected with some varnish. I'm getting ready to play this game. I've been so wanting to play this game. I've got all the miniatures for the first scenario painted. My third investigator is ready to go, and I am ready to play. So anyway, that's it for this video. I just wanted to address the Dungeon 23 thing that is, a few months ago or a month ago, the hype was Slap Chop, which was this new method to paint. Now it's Dungeon 23. I don't know what it'll be next month. But if you're going to do Dungeon 3, good luck. Go for it. Let us know how we can follow along with your progress. For me personally, you don't have to ask. I'm not doing it. I have no desire to participate. No negatives toward it. It's just not for me. So anyway, that's my 25-minute explanation of Dungeon 23 and why I won't be participating. All right, that's all I have for this video. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Thanks for joining me as I painted up Arielle and as I prepare to play this new game. I'll be back very soon with a new Let's Paint a Mini video. Until then, everybody, take care.